Hello all, I'm back. Good morning. Hope all is doing good. Today we're going to discuss trigonometry, part 2, I guess. Now the last video about trigonometry was about the right angle triangles. We discussed SOHCAHTOA. And if you remember in the previous video, برضو again, I'm sorry about my handwriting. I try as much as I can to improve that. Now, in the last video, we discussed trigonometry of right-angled triangles. And we discussed the 3 trigonometric functions, which are the SOHCAHTOA or SOHCAHTOA. Okay. Now, in this video, we are going to discuss all type of triangles. To be very specific, we are going to discuss the triangles that are not right-angled. And to be very specific with what I'm saying, what is required in any triangle? In any triangle, you will be required to calculate either a side or an angle. And of course, sometimes you might be asked to calculate the area. Okay, so for non-right angle triangles, we are going to discuss how to calculate the side of a triangle, how to calculate an angle of a triangle, and how to calculate the area of the triangle. Now, and يعني هو ده اللي احنا هنركز عليه النهارده عموما non right angle triangle. So let's move on to another slide, or let's just clear this page and let's just draw. Let me try and draw a proper triangle. Actually لا هنا ما فيش triangle, so مش مشكلة. I will just draw a triangle, and I need to remind you that any triangle has 6 elements. And we need to remember that very carefully. Okay, now these elements are 3 sides and 3 angles as well. Now, the first thing that we need to discuss before we get onto the rules of today, لأن احنا we're going to discuss 3 rules, sine rule, cosine rule, and area rule. We're going to take them طبعا one step at a time. But before we get into the core of our video today, now, as we said, we have 3 sides and 3 angles. Now, if you remember in the previous video when we discussed SOHCAHTOA, we said that the sides are usually called the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent. Now, what about all the other triangles in the world? Now, let's remember that angles are always labeled by capital letters. يعني, for example, this is مثلا angle number 1. I'm going to label it as capital A. This is angle number 2, label it as capital B, and this is angle number 3, which is labeled as capital C. يبقى أول حاجة قلناها بس كده، خليني بس أقول برضو بالعربي عشان صراحة بحب برضو أتكلم عربي وإنجليزي. يعني إنه أي triangle في الدنيا بيبقى فيه دايما 6 حاجات، 3 sides and 3 angles. تمام؟ The angles are always labeled by capital letters. We choose capital letters, any random capital letters, as you can see, وبنحط دي angle A ودي angle B ودي angle C. Now, what about the sides? Now, the sides are labeled by small letters. بختار للsides small letters, but not just any random small letters. خدوا بالكم بقى من الحتة دي كويس قوي. Please be careful. Now, as we said, for sides, we select small letters, but not any random small letters. We select these 3 exactly, but in the smaller case. يعني بصوا ركزوا بقى. If this is capital A, يبقى the side opposite to it is going to be small a. Every angle and the opposite side, we select the same letter for them. One as an uppercase and one as a lowercase. واحد capital واحد مش capital. يعني مثلا, for example, this is capital letter angle B. The side opposite to it is small b. زي ما اتفقنا أي angle والside اللي في وشها بياخدوا same letter. واحد capital وواحد small. And the last letter is capital C, as you can see, or the last angle is capital C. So the side opposite to it is small c. Okay, so if the angles are capital A, capital B, capital C, these are the angles. The opposite sides will be small a, small b, and small c. So let me just move on to another slide and give you another triangle. And let's label the triangle as capital X, capital Y, capital Z or Z. So what will be the letters labeled as? Now, at capital X, the side opposite to it will be small x. Capital Y, the side opposite to it is small y. And capital Z, the side opposite to it is small z or z, yani whatever we are going to write it, but it has to be written in the smaller case. اوكي فدي حاجة مهمة لازم نبقى عارفينها علشان نقدر نشتغل على الرولز المرحلة اللي جاية. تمام؟ طيب going back to our triangle over here. Now we are going to discuss يعني let's see whether I'm going to take one video that involves trigonometry كلها على بعضها for non-right angle يا إما هقسمهم two videos هنشوف. بس احتمال أقسمهم two videos. We are going to discuss in order the sine rule, the area sine rule, and then we have the cosine rule. And then we have the cosine rule. These are the rules that we are going to discuss in either one video or two videos, but I guess it's going to be divided into two videos. So actually in this video over here, so that the video is not super long, I'm going to discuss the sine rule and the area sine rule, okay? Now, if you remember, or if you have watched actually the, where's the eraser? Oh, hey. If you have watched the صح كحتوقة video, you will find that we said earlier, or I said earlier, that whenever we are going to discuss a rule, the first thing that we need to know about this rule is how does it look like? أي rule هنشتغل عليه أو نبتدي نشوف هنستعمله إزاي، لازم الأول نعرف شكله عامل إزاي. شكله إيه؟ حاطط فيونكة مش حاطط فيونكة، يعني شكله عامل إزاي. And then we'll see. First, you need to know how does the rule look like. And then you need to know when do we use this rule. أنا إمتى من حقي أستعمل الرول ده? When am I allowed to use this rule? And the third question that we're going to answer today is how are we going to use this rule? يبقى أي رول هنتناقش فيه النهاردة أو عموما أنا لما بشرح كده. أول حاجة لازم نعرف الرول ده شكله عامل إزاي. وتاني حاجة لازم نعرف أنا بستعمله إمتى أصلا. وتالت حاجة لازم أعرف هستعمله إزاي. How does the rule look like? When do I use it? And how do I use it? Now, as I said, we have three rules to be discussed. The first rule that we are going to discuss today is the sine rule. Okay? And let's see the first question. How does the sine rule look like? الساين rule ده شكله عامل ازاي؟ الساين rule عبارة عن 3 fractions أو 3 ratios بالشكل ده. The sine rule is made of 3 fractions separated by equal signs, as you can see. 3 fractions or 3 ratios. The numerator of the ratios will be the sides of the triangle. فوق بنكتب sides, which are small a, small b, and small c. So the numerator will include the sides, small a, small b, small c. And what about the denominator? The denominator will be the sine of the opposite angle, the sine of the opposite angle. So let me use the highlighter. So for instance, side A, the opposite angle of it is capital A. Okay, so the fraction will be side over sine the opposite angle. Now let's check the second pair. The second pair is side B. Now what is the opposite angle of side B? The opposite angle of side B is capital B. So this is actually what we call a pair. A pair is made out of the side and an opposite angle. So if I wish to write the fraction of this angle or of this pair, it would be side B and asfa, divided by sine the opposite angle. So A over sine A, B over side B, and of course I can tell now that you can find the remaining pair, which is C and capital C. Okay, so let me write the last pair, which is C over sine capital C. And this is how the sine rule looks like. Side over sine opposite angle, side over sine opposite angle, side over sine opposite angle. 3 fractions. فوق بنحط الsides وتحت بنحط sine opposite angle. Sine opposite angle. And each side and its angle, we call them a pair. A pair. ده البير بتاعي, side والangle بتاعته. And this is the first question, which is how does it look like? The second question is, when do I use the sine rule? And when we move on to the following slide, we are going to discuss كمان how do we use the sine rule. Now, to be able to answer these 2 questions, I'm going to move on to an example immediately. Okay, a numerical example. So let me give you this example over here. لو أنا جيت رسمت triangle زي ده وقلت لكم مثلا for example, this is angle 60 and this is side, for example, 20. And then I have, this is angle of measure, for example, 50. And I am required to find the value of this side over here, or the length of this side over here. Now, please ركزوا معايا إن إحنا دلوقتي we are going to discuss when do we use the sine rule and how do we use the sine rule. خليني أحطه هنا كده على جنب. Let me put it here كده on the side عشان بس إيه يبقى قدامنا. قلنا A over sine A, B over sine B, C over sine C. And this is how it looks like. Okay, this is how it looks like. Now let's see how do I use it and when do I use it. Now, when do I use the sine rule? I use the sine rule when I have a complete pair. I use the sine rule when I have a complete pair. And what do I mean by a complete pair? يعني when I have a side and the opposite angle. So I use the sine rule when I have a pair. في pair هستعمل الساين rule. مفيش pair مش هستعمل الساين rule. And the pair is made out of a side and the opposite angle. الانجل بتاعته. And this is the answer of question 2 اللي هو when. Now let's see بقى how do I use the sine rule. And these are بقى دلوقتي the solving steps. How do I use the sine rule? Now, to use the sine rule, as you can see, it is made out of 3 fractions. We are not going to use all 3. I will just, this is step number 1. Let me write it as step 1. ST1. ST1 means step 1. So as we said, I don't need the 3 fractions. I only need 2 of them. I just need 2. In the first fraction, or in the first ratio, I write my pair. In the first fraction, I write the pair. And remember that in the numerator, we write the sides. In the denominator, we write the sine of the opposite angle. فوق sides وتحت sine الانجل. الفراكشن الأولاني بحط البير اللي هو إيه بقى؟ The side over sine the opposite angle. اللي هو ده. This is your pair. And in the other fraction, what do I put? I put my unknown. وبليز بقى خدوا بالكم إنه whenever you are required to calculate a side, you must have the opposite angle. لو أنا عايزة أجيب side لازم الانجل بتاعته تكون موجودة. لازم الانجل بتاعته تكون موجودة. So in the other fraction, I put the unknown. I am required to calculate this side over here. Do I have its opposite angle? Yes. So the side over opposite angle. Sine 50 بالشكل ده. And this is step number 1. طبعا هنعمل example تاني. Now what is step number 2? Step number 2 بقى خلاص is super easy, which is cross multiplication to find the value of your unknown which is side x. لأنه remember إنه in this example over here, a side is required. A side is required. So step number 2 is make x subject or cross multiply. So x equals 20 times sine 50. دول times بعض. The two values opposite to each other multiplied divided by the third item divided by sine 60. And then on the calculator, please remember that in Math O level, we only deal with angles that have units of degrees. We only deal with degrees. So you must have a small d on top of your calculator. دلوقتي بقى أنا أهو معايا الكالكوليتر. I will just insert this big fraction, this big red fraction on the calculator as it is with the brackets and everything. And then on the calculator, I just did something wrong هنا. عملت كتبت 2 sine واحدة بس. 20 times sine 50 over sine 60. And then I will get an answer, of course, after rounding, which would be 17.7. Okay. And that was the first example on how to use the sine rule when you are required to calculate a side. How to use the sine rule when you are required to calculate a side. Now let's take another example on how to use the sine rule to calculate a side. How to use the sine rule to calculate a side, and I'm going to go through all this again. Now, if you understood what I said, you can pause the video and actually start and working on this example on your own. Let me just share the notes. Now, if you are using my notes, okay, you can open it to page number 245. The page is displayed on the screen. And let's solve this question together, which is question number 4. Okay, we are going to solve question 8. Now, let me summarize what we discussed so far. We discussed the sine rule, and I'm going to write it again over here on the side, just to stress on the fact that we are discussing the sine rule. Side over sine, side over sine, side over sine. Okay? So this is how it looks like. Now again, the question is, find the length of BC, giving your answer to 3 significant figures. Now, whenever you look at a triangle, the first, because it gets confusing, what do I use? Do I use صح كحتقى? Do I use the sine rule? Later on, you ask yourself, do I use the cosine rule? It gets confusing. Now, please remember very well that صح كحتقى or سكتوى, they are only used in right-angled triangles. That means you're not allowed to use them in this question whatsoever. You're not allowed to use them. So these 3 trigonometric functions are only used in right-angled triangles, while the sine rule could be used in any triangle that you want. تخيلوا بقى, even if it's a right-angled triangle. يعني some of my students actually decide to get rid of SOHCAHTOA and not use them anymore and always use the sine rule. So you can use the sine rule in any triangle that you want, even if it has a right angle. Now, most importantly is, when do I use the sine rule so that I don't panic, and how do I use the sine rule? Now, to use the sine rule, or if you look at the question and you think to yourself, am I allowed to use the sine rule? You need to look for a pair. Oh, this is a pair. And what do I mean by a pair? A pair means a given side and the opposite angle. يعني السايد والانجل بتاعته هما الاثنين لازم يكونوا موجودين as numbers. Okay? Given as numbers. تمام. So, do I have a pair? Do I have a pair in this question? Yes, I do. So I'm allowed to use the sine rule. من حقي إن أنا استعمله. Now, moving on بقى to the steps. Step 1. How do I use the sine rule? To use the sine rule, we only need 2 fractions of these. Not 3, 2, to be able to cross multiply. طيب, let's fill in the blanks. How do I use these fractions? In the first fraction, please write the pair. And remember that the sides are your numerator والangles are the denominator. طبعا بأكد side على sine. في ناس بيحطوا الانجل فوق. صح. أنا بس بحط الsides فوق. So let's start by the pair. Side over sine opposite angle. This is your pair. Now let's see بقى the unknown. طيب, I am required to calculate this side over here. طيب, do I have its opposite angle? Yes, I do. أنا عندي الانجل بتاعته. Please يا جماعة خدوا بالكم من القصة دي. إنه لو أنا عايزة أجيب side لازم الانجل بتاعته تكون موجودة. I am required to find the length of side BC and I do have its opposite angle. So in the other fraction, I put the unknown. أهو أنا I want this side الانجل بتاعته موجودة. طيب, what do I write over here? You can write small x. You can write BC. You can put a question mark. Whatever. I don't really care صراحة. يعني what you put over here. If you wish to apply the theory that we wrote before, إنه this is capital A, for this is side A, فما فيش أي مشكلة. إنه this would be A over sine 62. But seriously, I don't want you to panic what to write over here. You can write whatever you want. X, question mark, أي حاجة مش فارقة. تمام؟ فهنسميه X أو small a, whatever. And then step number 2 immediately is your cross multiplication. I am required to calculate side A, so I will make A subject, and I'm sure a year 10 student knows how to cross multiply. These two multiply together, 8.4 times sine 62 divided by the remaining item, which is sine 75. Please remember to close the brackets between the angles. And please always remember to use the calculator once. You don't have to use the calculator so many times. أحسب ده وأحسب ده. دايما يا جماعة حاولوا يعني إيه. I always tell my students, it's the quality of your work, not the quantity. It's not the matter of how many steps you write. It's the matter of the quality of your step divided by sine 75. So I'm just going to place this on the calculator. I got this answer, 7.6783 and so on. طبعا, of course, here it says round to 3 significant figures. This is your third significant figure. So your answer would be 7. Let me just make sure that I wrote this correctly. 8.4 times sine 62 over sine 75. تمام. So 7.68. Now, let's just pause a bit and see. Is this a logical answer? Does it make sense? Okay, and this is 7.68. Actually, it does. Why? Because the greater the angle, please listen carefully to this sentence. Let me just erase all this. The greater the angle, the greater the opposite side. The smaller the angle, the smaller the opposite side. So since the 62 is less than 75, so definitely the side opposite to it will be less than 8.4. So now we have discussed 2 examples on how to use the sine rule when you are required to calculate a side. Before I move on to the second case, which is how to use the sine rule to calculate an angle, I just want to point out something in this example over here. عايزة بس أقول حاجة قبل ما ندخل على الكيس الثانية. Let's assume I was required to calculate this side over here, which is side AB. Okay? كده يعني الexample ده I have the pair already. The pair is there. So I know already that this is a sine rule question. But the question is, what if I was required to calculate the length of AB instead? Now, the dilemma here is that the length AB or side AB doesn't have the opposite angle. مش موجودة الانجل بتاعته. So what do I do in this case? ايه ده الانهيار العصبي؟ ازاي يا مس تجيب لنا سؤال زي ده؟ بس I guess you all know the answer. يا مس اللي انت بتقوليه ده كلام فاضي. I can easily calculate angle C by 180 minus 62 plus 75. So you can easily calculate this angle over here, 180 minus 62 plus 75, and you get an answer of 43. So now I have the opposite angles. فدلوقتي خلاص I am back to my happy face and I can calculate the side using the sine rule. So what I'm trying to say is that if you can calculate a missing angle that will help you using the sine rule, then do so. مفيش أي مشكلة خالص. And sometimes you must calculate an angle to be able to use the sine rule. Again, sometimes you must calculate an angle to be able to use the sine rule. And that was the first part of the day, which is how to use the sine rule to calculate a side. Now let's move on to this example over here, which is in the same page. I added this example over here. And let's see what is the difference between this question and the one above, or the ones that we discussed before. Now, the ones that we discussed before, a side was required. Now, what do you notice over here? يا حبايبي يا حلوين. أحلى حاجة إن أنا عندي قطة، مش عندي قطة، يعني أنا في الإمارات حاليا، فالقطة بتاعت ابن أختي بيمبو قاعد بيتفرج معايا وبيسمع معايا. Now, in this triangle over here, I am required to calculate an angle. I am required to calculate an angle. إيه ده يا مس دينا؟ هل إحنا ينفع إن إحنا نستعمل الساين rule to calculate an angle? Yes, we can use the sine rule to calculate an angle. Let me remind you of something that we discussed in the SOHCAHTOA video, في الفيديو بتاع SOHCAHTOA. If you remember the 3 trigonometric functions that we used in the right angle triangles, I'm just going to take one as an example. هما sine xo على h and the كح and the toa, if you remember. Now, الفورمة العادية, or this normal form, is what we use to calculate a side. So on your calculator, actually, when you look at the sine button, you'll find written on top of it sine inverse بالشكل ده. Okay? So, الفورمة العادية, this normal form, is what we use to calculate a side. Now, who remembers what did we do in the previous video to calculate an angle? ها انتوا قولوا بقى. To calculate an angle, if you remember, we just ضربناها بالشلوت وديناها الناحية التانية كده. We just shifted the sign as sine inverse, and we kept the fraction as is. And if you remember when we said to calculate an angle, we always use the inverse form, اللي هي sine minus 1, اللي هي الفورمة دي. So the button is used to calculate the side. What is written on top of the button, on top of the button, sine inverse, cosine inverse, tan inverse, is what we use to calculate an angle. اللي أنا كنت سميتها وقعدت أقلش كده وأقول لكم قال إيه فورمة الساحل. So الفورمة العادية is what we use to calculate a side, and the inverse form is what we use to calculate an angle. Do we apply this on our topic today? Yes, definitely. Okay, يبقى always remember إن إحنا we use the inverse form to calculate an angle. So let's see, how do we start from here? Most probably يا جماعة trigonometry of triangles اللي هي مش right angle ممكن تاخد 2 videos أو 3 videos, لأنه ممكن أعمل فيديو كمان for applications وحاجات زي كده. Actually, I'm just going to solve one example only related to this part over here. طيب, let's see. إيه أول حاجة بعملها whenever I look at a triangle? What is the first thing that you always think about? أهو أنا في الامتحان and I am thinking. The first thing that you need to think about whenever you're dealing with triangles is that, what type of triangle is that? Is it a right angle triangle or is it not a right angle triangle? It's a not right angle triangle. So I'm allowed to use the sine rule, the cosine rule, and the area rule. Okay. هنا مفيش صح كحتوقة تاني. So the second thing that you need to ask yourself, what rule do I use? أنا هستعمل إيه في المسألة دي? Now, the first thing, again and again and again, that you look for is a pair. Do I have a pair? Do I have a pair in this triangle over here? Yes, I do. I have a pair. So And this pair, again, is made out of a side and the opposite angle. Since I have a pair, so I am allowed to use the sine rule. I am allowed to use the sine rule. خلاص أنا عارفة دلوقتي إن أنا هقدر أستعمل الساين rule. Now أقوم على طول عاملة كده fraction equal fraction because خلاص بقى this is a قلنا how to use it. So step number 1 is fraction equals fraction. Okay, now what do I write as we said in the first fraction? The pair, which is the side over sine the opposite angle, which is sine 50. Now let's look back at the unknown in this question. The unknown in this question is an angle. Do I have the opposite side? Yes, I do. تاني بأكد. Okay, لو أنا عايزة side لازم الانجل بتاعته تكون موجودة. لو أنا عايزة angle لازم السايد بتاعها يكون موجود. So to calculate an angle, I must have its opposite side. Please, everyone, remember that we write the sides فوق and the angles تحت. مس انت ليه حاطه الانجل هنا small letter؟ انا بحط بس x وكده وخلاص، زي ما قلت لكم مش فارقه قوي يعني. Okay? So side over sine x. Over side the opposite angle. And then what do I do next? Remember that we always cross multiply to make the unknown subject. Now, what is the unknown here? The unknown here is sine x. So step number 2, I will make sine x subject. Okay, فهنعمل دول times بعض. I will cross multiply عادي يعني. So 12 times sine 50, the two values opposite to each other multiplied, divided by the third item, which is 20. Now, the question is, am I required to calculate the sine of the angle? ولا I am required to calculate the angle itself? لا, I am required to calculate the angle itself. فهنا بقى I will add a third step. And what is this third step? This third step is a reminder that we are going to calculate an angle. And when we calculate the angle, you must remember that we always use the inverse form. So step number 3 is going to be making x subject لوحدها. How do I make x subject? هناخد الساين and I will أديها بالشلوت move to the other side. Shift the sign as sine inverse. يعني كل ده كده هقوم حاطة قبليه sine inverse. Okay, عادي جدا. أهو. Maybe I can give you another example. And then 12 times sine 50 over 20. And I will place all of this on the calculator. So as you can see, there is one extra step over here, which is moving the sign to the other side as sine inverse, the whole fraction. And then I will highlight everything that needs to be placed on the calculator, which is all this. You just write it as it is on your calculator. So shift sign, 12 times sine 50 over 20. And then on the calculator, after rounding, you should get an angle of 27.4, which makes sense. إنه if this angle over here is 27.4, فالside اللي بوشها is a smaller side. So let me just give you another quick example about how to calculate the angle in a sine using the sine rule. بس سامحوني لو الإجابة طلعت error ولا حاجة لأن لازم تكون الأرقام مظبوطة. So let's just take another random triangle. So let's assume I have this triangle over here and I'm required to calculate, let me just look. What was required here? Okay, so let me just give you, let's go back to the whiteboard and give another example. Let's assume مثلا this is 8.6. لا مش 8.6, we use this number. Okay, let's assume this is 15 and this is angle X and this is مثلا 7 and this is angle كام؟ نحط هنا كام؟ نحط مثلا 42 أي حاجة. For example. دي كده مش تبقى مظبوطة. let's see يعني even if it's error يبقى بس الأرقام مش مظبوطة. Okay. طيب so let's see خلينا okay let's see خلي ده 10 مثلا هنا كده. Okay. Now let's start from scratch. How do I start with this triangle over here? If you get such a question in an exam, the first thing that you do is you need to ask yourself, what rules am I going to use? صح كحتوقة are totally excluded because this is not a right angle triangle. So far you are only allowed to use the sine rule. Now let's confirm, why are you allowed to use the sine rule in this question? You are allowed to use the sine rule in this question because you have a pair. Now where is your pair? That is your pair. The angle and the opposite side. Okay, so you are allowed to use the sine rule, so you can immediately proceed with this step over here, which is fraction equal fraction. And in the first fraction, put your pair, which is the side first, and then the sine of the opposite angle, the sine of the opposite angle. Okay, now let's check the unknown. Now, the unknown could be a side, could be an angle. If the unknown is a side, then يعني كده in the second fraction you will put the unknown. You will put the unknown. تمام؟ unknown دي مكتوبة غلط. Unknown. You will put the unknown. Okay? Now, when you place the unknown, again, put the side first and then put the angle below. ودايما it's going to be sine the angle. Okay? طيب, what do I do next in this case? Always remember to make the unknown subject. So now this is your unknown. So these two multiply together. So sine x is equal to 15 times sine 42. غالبا دي هتطلع error. Over 10. Now, the extra step that you need to put over here is that because you are required to calculate an angle, so you shift the sign to the other side of your fraction. So this would be x equals sine inverse 15 times sine 42 على 10. I think this will be error. Shift sine 15 times sine 42 على 10. مش هتظبط دي غالبا. خلينا نشوف. And then you just place it on the calculator. ما طلعتش مظبوطة. لو خليناها 5 ممكن تظبط هنا. Okay, so we can change this to 30. Okay, let's just change this into 30. Okay, so it's going to be 30 over sine 42 equals to 15 over sine x. And then sine x is equal to 15 times sine 42 over 30. Now you'll get an answer. Okay, and then the angle would be 19.5. 19.5. And this is how to use the sine rule if you are going to calculate an angle. It's just, let's change this into 30 so that you don't get an error. طبعا in exams, you will never get error. You will never get error. So as you can see, this is just the extra step that you do if you wish to use the sine rule to calculate an angle. Now, we discussed the sine rule with full details. Now let's move on to the second rule that we're going to discuss in this video, which is the area sine rule. The area sine rule. And why do I want to discuss it in this video? Because it's related to sine. It is super easy and it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. Now we all know that for right angle triangles, if I'm given this as 10 and this as 12, we all know that the area of a right angle triangle is half base height. Half base height, or base height over 2. Now, please let's remember together that the base and the height are two sides that are intersecting at 90 degrees. Intersecting at 90 degrees. The base and the height are two sides that are perpendicular on each other. So the area here is half times 10 times 12. And then you get whatever answer, half times 10 times 12, which is 60. And then you get the area. But the origin of the area of any triangle في الدنيا, even if it's a right angle, is half times a side times another side times sine the angle in between. Half times side times side times sine angle in between. يعني ايه يا مس اللي انت بتقوليه ده؟ يعني if I have two sides and the angle in between them given, if I have two sides and the angle in between them given, I can calculate the area of any triangle that I want. So let's redo this again. So half times the first side, which is 10, times the second side, which is 12, times, do I have the angle in between? Yes, I do, which is sine 90. Half times side times side times sine angle in between. On the calculator, will I get the same answer? Try it now. Yes, definitely. Why? Because let's بقى do ايه؟ يعني خلينا برضو نبقى فاهمين شوية. Let's take sine 90 كده on the side and place it on the calculator separately. You'll find that the value of sine 90 is 1. That's why the shortcut of the right angle triangle is half base height. بس هي أصلا كانت إيه؟ كانت half times base times height times sine 90, which is the angle in between them. تمام كده؟ بس why am I allowed to remove sine 90 from the rule? Because sine 90 is equal to 1. That's why the shortcut of the right angle triangle area is half base height. أيوة، يعني أنت عايزة إيه؟ أنا عايزة the area of أي triangle في الدنيا. The area of any triangle in the world is half times side times another side times sine the angle in between them. The angle in between. طبعا أنا عارفة إن الرولز دي ليها طرق بتتكتب بيها، واكتب الرول وحط يا اولاد واحفظ، بس انا دي مش طريقتي في الشرح. يعني مثلا في ناس او مش في ناس، هو ايه اهو ادي السايدز بتوعي A B C وادي angle C. So the area sine rule is half times A times B times sine angle in between. يعني ده وده والانجل اللي ما بينهم مثلا. انا مش بحب اكتب الرولز بالطريقه دي، ما اعرفش، مش برتاح كده نفسيا. بحب ان الرول نغنيها كده. يعني لما تيجوا تشوفوا الفيديو بتاع الكوزاين رول هتفهموا انا قصدي ايه. So the area of any triangle you want is half time side sine S side times sine angle in between times sine angle in between. Meaning what? Let's go back to the لا مش let's go back. خلينا كده بس أبص على حاجة هنا. ده إحنا خلصناه. هنا أهو. Back to question number 4. يبقى back فعلا أهو. Back to this question over here اللي هو in the notes page number 245. Back to this question over here. هنا بقى في السؤال ده let's move on to question B. خليني بس أرسم التراينجل هنا بس على نظافة. أوكي. همسح بس ده هنا كده. أوكي. ونمسح الدوشة دي كلها. Okay. Now question B بقى says what here in this triangle? Says calculate the area. It says calculate the area of this triangle over here. Now, in question number A, if you remember, we calculated this side over here, which is 7.68. How do I calculate the area of this triangle over here? To calculate the area of any triangle, since you have two sides given, and the angle in between, so you need to look for the angle in between, then you can calculate its area. Now, if you look at this question, هنا question B ده, angle C is missing. احنا كنا عملناها قبل كده يعني، بس احنا بنقول دلوقتي as if we're starting from scratch. Now, if we're required to calculate the area, since I have these two sides given over here, I must have this angle. Now, can I easily calculate this angle? Definitely, of course, I can calculate the angle. So again, guys, if there is the option of calculating an angle missing, do it by 180 minus. So as far as I remember, we did it, it was 43, but let's redo it again. 180 minus 62 plus 75. So the answer is 43. This is the angle in between them, or the angle, the angle at the intersection of the two sides. Now I can easily calculate the area by applying the rule. Half times the first side times the second side times sine the angle in between. That's why I always like to calculate L. I always like to explain the sine rule مع الاريا قصدي مع الساين rule. So half times 8.4 times 7.68 times sine 43 on the calculator after rounding to three significant figures هي طالعه لي 21.99. So after rounding I will get an answer of 22 degrees. Okay, I think the area is super easy, so let's just take a couple of more examples on the area. Okay, فخلينا نروح على classified part 1. يعني احنا هنعمل ده بس مش ده اللي انا عايز اعمله دلوقتي. Classified part 1, if you are using my notes, let's look راحت فين اهو. If you are using my notes, classified part 1, page number 140. Classified part 1, page number 140. As you can see, this is a very, very basic example over here that says calculate the area of this triangle over here. Now, what do I look for immediately? I look for two sides and the angle in between them, or the angle at the intersection of these two sides. يعني يا جماعة مش أي angle كده مع أي two sides. لازم تبقى الانجل اللي موصلة ما بينهم بالشكل ده. It must be the angle at the intersection of the two sides. And then I easily calculate the area. طبعا you have to write the working out. Half times the first side times the second side times sine the angle at the intersection, or the angle in between. And then you just apply it on the calculator. Half times 7 times 10 times sine 105. I'll write the answer before rounding, which is 33.807, whatever. It says three significant figures. The third significant figure is the 8. So the answer is 33.8. So this is a basic example. Now we have two applications related to the sine rule that I'm going to discuss now. I guess it's quite easy. خلاص, two more examples to go. And then that's it for this video. ما كانش ينفع فعلا خالص نعمل الكوزاين رول في الفيديو ده. كوزاين رول هخليه الفيديو لوحده، فغالبا هيبقى فيه التريجونومتري ان توتال، يعني اللي هي مش رايت انجل، 3 فيديوز. ساين رول مع الاريا، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الكوزاين رول، وممكن نعمل كوزاين رول مع مثلا كام tricky question كده، وهنعمل another video for the applications. Already there is a video about the bearing angle and the angles of elevation. Okay, so here the question says work out the area of the kite. Kite ايه مس الكلام ده؟ احنا ما اتفقناش على كده. احنا كنا الشغل كله كان triangles. Miss, why did you move on to shapes with 4 sides? Now we were dealing with triangles. What happened? Now here it says calculate the area of the kite. Now the kite is one of the very, very famous questions that come in your exams. Now the kite can be easily divided into triangles. But the thing is, how do I calculate the area of the triangle, of the kite? And how do I divide my kite into triangles? Do I draw the horizontal diagonal بالشكل ده, and then I get these two triangles مثلا, for example? ولا it's going to be super complicated? ولا do I draw the longer triangle بالشكل ده, and then I will get two identical or two congruent triangles. Now the word congruent is the same as the word identical. These two triangles are exactly the same. So if you use the magic trick اللي أنا كنت بقولها برضو لو أنا بدرسكم في المدارس اللي مش عاجبك خبيه, and I actually erase this part over here, can't I easily calculate the area of this triangle and then double it to calculate the area of the whole kite? Of course I can do that. And let me remind you يا حبايبي يا حلوين, لو كنتوا فاكرين, if you have a triangle with 3 items, you can calculate the remaining 3. If you have a triangle with the 3 items, you can calculate the remaining 3. But since now we're just focusing on the area, فاحنا we're going to focus on the area. So as we said, for the kite, you draw the longer triangle, as you can see. I'm going to highlight these triangles. These two triangles are totally identical, so it would be enough to calculate the area of one triangle and multiply by 2, applying the area sine rule, which is side half times side multiplied by the sine of the angle connecting them, okay? So area of 1 is, I'm just going to zoom out and write it here. So the area of one triangle, which is half times 6.4. شايفة معلش هو بس أحيانا بيعمل كده. I don't know why. Let me يمكن I need to I don't know if the sound was hidden because I just received a phone call. So as we said, this is the area of one triangle only. Now I need 2 triangles, so all I need to do is just double it, multiply by 2, and this would be the area of the kite. Okay, and then now just place it as it is on the calculator. 2 times half times 6.4. Is it 6.4? Yeah, let me just make sure. Yes, 6.4 times 9.7 times sine 110. Okay, and then on the calculator, I will get an answer, which is 58.3 after rounding immediately. So this is one of the interesting questions, which is not super bad, related to the area sine rule and how we can use it to find the area of the kite. Taban, you have to be smart on how to divide your triangles. If you can get 2 congruent triangles, just find area of 1, multiply by 2. Of course, this would be super easy. Now, the last question that we're going to do today is this. Now, going back to the notes. Where is it? هو فين يا ربي؟ لا مش هنا. راح فين. This triangle, this question. Please, this is the last question of the day, and it is super important, and I please want you to remember this question very well. Now, let me just give you a very, very small example here on the whiteboard. Now, we all know that the area of the circle is pi r squared. Okay? Now, let's assume I was asked 2 questions related to the area. Let's assume I was asked to calculate the area, find area, if I am given مثلا the radius as 5. فطبعا هنا what do I do is that I substitute immediately pi times pi squared, and then on the calculator you get the answer. What if, now again, let me just write it properly. This is the rule of the area. A equals pi r squared. What if I was given the area, يعني مثلا early area is 100, and I was required to calculate the radius. Now, in this case, what do I do? Yes, I will create an equation. I will replace the area with 100. 100 equals pi r squared. And then I will make r subject to calculate the radius. I will make r subject to calculate the radius. So basically what I'm trying to say is that in any rule in math, you can substitute to calculate the area, or you can create an equation to calculate another quantity from this rule. So going back to the final question in our video today, here it says the area of the triangle is 14. Okay, now what I always tell my students is that whenever you have a sentence with the word is, then this is considered as a key sentence that you can change into an equation. Okay, so let's just translate it, لان احنا زي ما كنا قلنا قبل كده احنا ملناش في مواضيع التعبير. We are mathematicians, so we don't deal with compositions and long wording. We need rules. So let's just translate this sentence, the highlighted sentence, into a very simple equation. So area is 14. Because as we said, is always translated into equal. Please check the units so that there are no unit changes in the question. Now, this is a triangle question. Okay? إيه معلوماتي عن ال area of the triangle? What is the information that I know about the area of triangle? Now, if it is a right angle triangle, as we said, so it's half base height for right angle triangle. If it is a triangle, then we use the half times side times sine, the angle in between. Now, is this a right angle triangle? No, it's not. Why? Because مش علشان it doesn't look so. It's because the examiner did not say. In math, we don't assume anything. In math, we don't assume. ده شكله كذا ده شكله كذا. لا, if the examiner didn't mention clearly that this is a right angle triangle, so this is not a right angle triangle. So since this is just a triangle, and I have an equation over here, capital A on the left-hand side, and then the number of the, area on the left-hand side, and then the number on the right-hand side, I can remove this area and put its rule. دايما يا جماعة في أي equation كده بص يمين وشمال. في أي equation بص يمين وشمال. Can I remove and put rule? Yes. I can remove the left-hand side of the equation and put the rule of the area, which is half times side times sine, the angle in between, this is the left-hand side, equals to 14. Equals to 14. Type. Do I have the given sides in this triangle? Yes, I do. الاتنين دول. Do I have the angle in between? لا. I don't have the angle in between. But let's read the rest of the question. The question said, calculate the size of the obtuse angle, giving your answer to one decimal place. Since I will use the area sine rule, يبقى أنا غصب عني بتكلم على angle A. Since, again, I'm going to say this sentence again. Since I am using these two sides in my calculation, this means that 100% I am talking about angle A. 100% I'm talking about angle A. So I will substitute now. Half times first side, which is 4.9. طبعا if you wish to write 6.5 الأول مش فارقة. Times the second side, which is 6.5. Times what is the angle in between? The angle in between is capital A, equals to 14. So it's just basic substitution. Always arrange to make the unknown subject. The unknown over here is sine A. So let's make sine A subject. أنا من أنصار equality. Okay, so sine A. طبعا you can calculate these three by multiplication and then move to the other side by division. I just أنا مش بحب كده. أنا بحب أعملها in one step. These numbers, they're all multiplied, so I will move to the other side by division. 14 over half times 4.9 times 6.5. معلش, sometimes it freezes when I write. Okay, so sine, the angle is, as we said, all these numbers multiplied, move my division. Now, we discussed this already خلاص by several times, that I am not required to calculate sine of the angle. I am required to calculate the angle itself. So to calculate the angle itself, I'm going to move I'll remove the word sine from this side of the equation to the other side, هنا كده, of my equation as sine inverse. Shift the sign in one step. Shift the sign. Now, on the calculator, I will immediately get the answer of question A. Okay, so shift sign. This is a very important question, and there is a trick in this question. خدوا بالكم. Okay, 14 over half times 4.9 times 6.5. طلعت الإجابة. The answer I got is 61.5. إيه ده بقى؟ إزاي؟ Now the examiner said that this angle is obtuse, but my calculator gave an acute answer. How بقى does this work? وبعدين إيه بقى الحل في المشكلة دي؟ طب يا miss, let's go through the steps. Maybe you did something wrong. Let's see. Now the question here says the area is 14. And we wrote it over here simplified. A is 14. Now, we said it so many times that the area is two sides and the angle in between them. I have the two sides already. So definitely 100% I am discussing angle A. So half times 4.9 times 6.5 times this angle times the sine of the angle in between, which is angle A, is 14. And then I did basic calculation. I moved all these to the other side by division, which is the step that I did over here. وبالمرة, I shifted the sign as sine inverse. And I did the math again on the calculator, and this is the answer that I got. Now, inshallah, because I'm planning to do AS videos as well, advanced math level videos. Now, in the advanced level math, you're going to take this part by details. I'm just going to explain it in a very simple way. Now, let's draw a straight line over here, and let's just draw an acute angle of measure 61.5. Where is the obtuse angle of 61.5? This is the obtuse angle of 61.5. So I am required to find this angle over here. Now, since this is a straight line, and since the sum of these two angles is 180, طبعا this will be discussed with further details in advanced math في AS. How do I find the obtuse angle in this question over here? To find the obtuse angle, I will subtract 61.5 from 180. So, طبعا, please remember to use the answer button. Okay, so 180 minus answer, and then I will get the obtuse angle. أو ممكن نعملها بقى 180 minus 61.5 because the examiner said round to one decimal place على طول. So the angle is 118.5. This is a very, very important question. Okay, if the question just says find the sides of the angle وسكت وخلاص, then if you get this answer, then it's correct 100%. If you get this answer, then it's correct 100%. But if the examiner gave such a question and the angle required is obtuse and your answer or your outcome is an acute angle, so how would you find the obtuse angle? By 180 minus. To find the obtuse angle, you just subtract 180, you just subtract the acute from 180. اعمل بس 180 minus الانجل اللي انا طلعتها يطلع لي الاوبتيوز انجل على طول. طبعا دي ليها reason وليها سبب، بس حاولت اوريكم السبب هنا بطريقه بسيطه جدا جدا جدا. فدي من الاسئله او من التريكس اللي كانت جت قبل كده في الامتحانات. So before I end this video, let's play a little game now together. Now, sine on the calculator. Let's do it together حتى. Sine 30 on the calculator. Let's do it now. Okay, sine 30. Sine 30 on the calculator is half. Okay, now let's see what other angle will give the same sine value. هل في angle تانية لو أنا جبت الساين بتاعها يطلع لي half برضو؟ أهو, this is your straight line. This is angle 30. What is the obtuse angle of angle 30? لو أنا عايز أجيب الانجل اللي هنا دي, how do I find this angle over here? 180 minus 30, which is 150. So try كده on your calculator, sine 150. You'll find that sine 150 has the same answer. Type sine 60 on the calculator. Sine 60 on your calculator is √3/2. Type, is there another angle that has the same sine value, which is √3/2? Remember to draw a straight line. Okay, now this is your angle, which is 60 degrees. What is the obtuse angle, or what is the supplementary angles? The word supplementary means they sum up to 180. Okay, so of course, if you do here 180 minus 60, which is 120, try كده on your calculator sine 120, you'll get the same answer, which is √3/2. So what I'm trying to say is that if you have any angle and you need to find what is the other angle that has the same sine value, so sine any angle is equal to sine 180 minus the angle. 180 minus the angle. So as we said, if the question required a certain angle and the angle that you got from the calculator is acute, remember that if you wish to find the obtuse angle, you just subtract your answer from 180. And that was a trick that came several times in so many questions, in so many exams. I hope that this video was helpful. لا ما كانش ينفع خالص إن نعمل الكوزاين رول في الفيديو ده. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you inshallah in the next videos. Bye.